Dr. Wilmer J. Leon is a veteran political scientist. He is a seasoned expert in black politics, American government, and public policy. Dr. Leon is a nationally broadcast radio talk show host, nationally syndicated columnist, and regular political commentator on national and international news programs. Wilmer joins Politics in Color as a featured anchor host.
Welcome to Day 2 coverage of the Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm Wilmer Leon, along with my co-anchors, Derek Kennedy and Brian Jenkins. We've got a lot of exciting things today. We got a chance to talk to a lot of great people. Brian, your thoughts, yesterday's events?
You know what? The conversations were great. What caught me was the furor of people who are Donald Trump fans. I mean, it doesn't matter what you talk about, the attempt on his life, all of the court cases, if you go all the way back to the Russia investigation, none of that seems to matter. These folks are Trump, and he's got a very good chance of winning this election.
Derek, yesterday we were on the floor when the vice presidential nominee's name was mentioned. Your thoughts? I felt that there was a lack of energy in the space. Your thoughts?
Well, I just want to say that day one for Politics in Color was such a success because after we started here, we were able to actually go and hear the live announcement for Donald Trump calling out his running mate, which, by the way, is not what happens on day one of a convention. Okay, so as the day moved forward with that type of news, so did Politics in Color. And yes, Wilmer, as you and I went over to hear that J.D. Vance is in fact the candidate that will be alongside Donald Trump, the 39-year-old junior senator from Ohio, is the pick. I think we were expecting more of a raucous applause. Yes. We were expecting more energy, more fever. Instead, I think we got what we call polite claps.
Mild reception.
Yes. And so with that, I think you and I stuck around to see exactly what people were feeling. So that was my kind of take on day one over on the floor.
And just quickly to follow up on that point, I think it's hard to describe because you don't want to downplay it. Right. Because they were applauding.
Yes.
People were seen to be pleased.
Yeah.
But the energy was low.
The energy was low.
Jonathan, you had some interesting run-ins yesterday.
Yeah, and the energy was low, but like Brian said a few moments ago, the energy was palpable.
Oh, yeah.
And the one thing that I feel in this building, and we're actually a couple of buildings away, but the one thing that I felt here on the RNC campus is this spirit that the election is already in the bag. If you talk to people around here, they're not guessing about who the next president's going to be. Yeah. As far as they're concerned, they've already won the race, which is reasonable to expect considering a lot of the polling. But I think it's important to know that with 112 days left, the race is not over. Yeah. I said yesterday how, we were talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene just several weeks ago. Anything can happen in a little bit more than 100 days.
In fact, to follow up on that point, it really seems as though in the minds of the Republicans here, Joe Biden isn't even really in the way. It's just a matter of turning the pages on the calendar. And
they're not taking into account that Joe Biden might not even be who they're running against, and it could be an entirely different race. So I'm really impressed by the unity among people here. Really impressed by the energy, but I said unity and not
unanimity.
Yes, because there are some folks who are riding right beneath the surface who are here because they're Republicans, but not necessarily here because they're behind Donald Trump. I spoke with Asa Hutchinson yesterday. Now, you actually ran for the office yourself, and as someone who's run and then seen someone else go on who wasn't yourself, what is that tricky little bit of adjustment that you've got to do when now you've got to rally behind the nominee and give the person your support who you might not have said such kind things about just several months before?
Well, it's problematic. Now,
I mean, Vance that's going to be an issue for Vance.
It is, and I mean, I was running against Donald Trump and I was running against Joe Biden. And, whenever I dropped out, I supported Nikki Haley, and then she ultimately dropped out. But I said that the character still counts, and I worried about the character of Donald Trump and leading our nation.
You were one of the only folks to say that, in fact, who shared the stage with him.
And I've been heartened, though, by at least his comments fresh out of the assassination attempt, in which he said we need to reduce the harshness. And so let's see how it performs here at the convention. Regretfully, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene that will be speaking. That sort of, it's hard to imagine her softening any rhetoric, but we will see. And so let's keep our options open in the fall. I'm a Republican. I want to vote for a Republican, but I've indicated that I don't want to support somebody who's been a convicted felon.
If lukewarm was a person.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just saying the same thing applies to this whole idea of J.D. Vance being selected. And you say, well, the reception was kind of lukewarm. Well, he's got economic policies that are in direct opposition to what Trump's talking about. So they've got some discussion, some splaining to do.
You also recall that it was just a short time ago that J.D. Vance was calling Donald Trump, America's Hitler. Saying that he hated the man, he couldn't stomach the man, that he planned to never, ever support Trump. Now, that was back in 2016. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump Jr. have since formed a great brotherhood relationship, which is how J.D. Vance was kind of pushed to the front because of Donald Trump Jr.'s relationship with J.D. Vance. And, of course, he just told his dad, hey, this is what we think is good. A 39-year-old who we can see as being the future, if he's groomed right, and he came around.
One of the things that when we were in the arena yesterday, and there was a gentleman standing next to me, and he asked me, well, what do you think about this? And I said, well, it's hard. I said, it's going to take me a little bit to process, because Donald Trump is not a traditional politician. So he doesn't follow the traditional logic, and as in a geographic representation, whether it's a gender issue representation, what demographic, what constituency are you trying to bring in with your selection? And so to your point about 3 or 4 years ago, J.D. Vance was comparing Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler. How do you go from that to this? And so that, to me, demonstrates these are some very, very strange politics.
Does J.D. Vance become the new Lindsey Graham? Do you see J.D. Vance making as much of a pivot?
And a little Marco Rubio, and I mean, he becomes in a whole line of those folks.
So is it opportunism? Is that what it is?
Absolutely.
It's politics.
Is it politics?
Isn't it all opportunism? And
Yeah.
we're talking about the Republican Party, right? Where it's kind of more about the me as opposed to the we, right? This is just facts and from what we witnessed, right?
How many of those people in the line have changed, have started out anti-Trump or never Trump, and now they're
If
on
you
the,
want
they're
to
on
be
board.
in the line,
There
that's
you go.
what you've had
There
to
you
do.
go. That's today's politics.
And I've said for a very long time, it's very, very difficult to rationalize. You can't compromise on the political end, or you can't compromise for political expediency on the front end, and then try to claim the moral high ground on the back end. That's just inconsistent, and this to me is a demonstration of that.
Two things that I think are just baseline for the choice of J.D. Vance. Number one, he's young. He's 39 years old, right? Married, 3 kids from middle America. Has the best kind of American story of, poverty and, my dad had to work. I went to the military. I found a way to graduate from Yale Law School. That's the bootstrap America story. We all know it. We appreciate it. We love it. And I think that the fact that he was able to put aside his differences for how he felt about Trump is the theme that the current Trump campaign is now trying to push, which is unity. Right?
That was hard for me to digest.
Hillbilly Elegy is still on the bookshelves.
Yes, it is.
And by the way, there was a movie made about it, and it's on Netflix.
But that's hard for me to digest when your comparison is Adolf Hitler. That one, and so I would say if the Democrats are paying attention and they're awake in this thing.
Oh, you're trying to be funny? Awake?
That is a line that should play. Joe Biden should come out and open every speech with, they compared him to Hitler. How is that? use their language against him? Because that one doesn't make sense.
You know, there's one thing that I've noticed, or at least I've begun to wonder about. I think the way in which Donald Trump approaches picking another person to be his running mate has nothing to do with whether they're capable of doing the job.
Right.
It has nothing to do with whether they fit his intentions. It has nothing to do with whether they're on the same page at all. I get the sense that Donald Trump intends to become president and to be the person, and he really doesn't care who occupies the second chair. It's really, and I think you can do that when you come from a place of invincibility, which now more than ever before for Donald Trump is as strong as it's ever been. He beat COVID. He beat a bullet. It looks like he's about to beat the case in Florida. He's had the case that he was actually convicted in put on hold for the sentencing of that, put on hold. This guy has a long line, a streak of wins that says, hey, I just need somebody to stand next to me, but you're not really going to be a part of this. I just, I need, like almost everything else in his existence right now, I need the bit players to form out the rest of the apprentice squad.
But with that sense of invincibility, there's also an incredible sense of ego.
Absolutely.
A very misplaced sense of ego. And I think he pays very close attention to who the person is because he wants to be sure that the person standing next to him
is a
does
loyalist.
is a loyalist and also does not cast a greater shadow than Donald Trump himself.
I mean, and we have to be honest. That's not just the Republicans.
No, that's
politics in general,
But we're
right?
at the Republican convention
I'm
about Republicans.
I understand, but so his tactic in not wanting to be overshadowed is not specific to just being Donald Trump or Republican. It happens in the Democratic Party as well.
I think that is a factor in his ego.
Yes, I think it is a factor. When we were on the floor and I spoke to Vivek Ramaswamy, which you'll see that interview soon, he was very keen on the pick, but there were others that just said, well, why that guy? He's so hard left, meaning so different, and he's more radical, and he's maybe the most conservative of those junior senators. Why this guy if you're trying to unite
And he
the
called
country?
you Hitler.
And he and Wilmer will not let it go that he called him Adolf Hitler. By the way, for the record, if you missed it, he called him Adolf Hitler.
if he'd have called him Mussolini,
Right.
okay. But
right.
What do you call him, Wilbur?
He went all the way.
I can't remember.
So that was an incredible. And that was just the first half of day one. That was the early afternoon session. I had a chance to go to the evening session as well, which is when Byron Donalds was able to speak. We were all quite. Shocked. What's the word when we saw the string of African Americans that led off
Thank you.
the speaking for the evening session? And the evening session's important for all at home to know because that's when prime time comes in. So everyone is seen globally when the prime time speakers come on. And the Republicans put African American after African American after African American after African. And I didn't know we had that many. But they were all lined up to go and speak, and then Byron Donalds was the last one to in the primetime slot. So I was able to see that, and I was quite
Maybe that was to
quite
massage
surprised.
them for not picking Tim Scott.
Well, that's what I was going to ask Dara, but I open it up to all of you. You're Tim Scott this morning. How do you feel?
Well, Tim Scott wasn't even in the box when I was on the floor last night, and when Donald Trump was in his box with his family. Guess who was to his right, though? Byron Donalds. And guess who to his left was his new vice president pick? There was no Tim Scott to be seen.
I feel as if more than any of the other candidates the pick-me candidates, I feel like Tim Scott probably had the most to lose. Not necessarily in
You
political...
mean by not being picked? Or by putting his hat in the ring in the first place?
And then not being picked.
Okay,
Right, both
okay.
of those.
I think his new book is coming out, Black Man's Elegy.
But, it wasn't just that Tim Scott
BET
spent...
is going to pick that one up, not Netflix. Actually, they may pass.
It wasn't just that Tim Scott spent political capital, but I feel like more than any of the other candidates, Tim Scott also spent a lot of social capital among folks who are most familiar with him and among African Americans in a way that other black politicians don't necessarily have to do. And
I don't know if I follow.
I don't either. Please
I'm not.
elaborate.
There's this sense that when you are a
Do me a
black
favor. Start that sentence again.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah, please.
So there's a sense that when you become a black Republican, there's a certain part of your and we know it. We know this term among us, but there's your black card, and you kind of have to check it at the gate. And other people who are black or people of color understand that you need to do that to a certain extent in order to move in this circle. And by and large,
And
we're
this
okay with
circle
it.
is what exactly?
In
Politics?
the Republican circle, the conservative
Well,
circle.
but see,
There's a
I
circle-
But not
I
all
don't
not
think-
all Republicans are conservative.
And I don't think
Well,
Tim Scott even has had a. I don't think that
Right.
Tim Scott ever looked in his pocket thinking he had a card.
Correct.
Right, correct.
Which is why he
But
runs.
Playing-
He
he's
runs
playing
to
from
the
a di-
stage.
He's
But I think
playing
the
from
one-
a different deck.
But I think the one that we were holding on to him just in case, I think that got
Well,
burned.
that was on us. That was on us. Now, because, and let me tell you why I say that in all seriousness. Because I did an interview a number of years ago with Armstrong Williams, and my grandfather.
Do you want to explain who Armstrong Williams is to
No. So, so
everybody? Ain't able.
Well, look it up. Look it up. So my grandfather was a Republican. And so I asked Armstrong, I said, can you give me some analysis of as an African American or black Republican, between your Republican Party today and the Republican Party that my grandfather was an incredibly proud member to be in? And he said to me, I don't see these politics in the matter of race. And so that's why that's where I get the point. I don't think Tim Scott is playing from that deck.
Do you think Tim
Interesting.
Scott is? So to
Well,
that-
I want to hear. I
yeah.
want to hear Brian's
Yeah.
point
Well,
of view on this.
You know, I was not a Tim Scott fan. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And
But
and
he's
for a
in the
variety
ball
of
game.
reasons.
He's in the game.
He's
He
in
has
the
a
game.
jersey. We have to recognize
He
him.
has he's in the game, but he is not
Yeah,
their
he's a
star
manager.
player.
Or
He's
that
he comes off the bench
There you
when
go.
they need him to come off the bench, and then they put him back on the bench.
So you're saying he's a role player?
Oh,
He's
no question.
he's just a role player, and I think that he thought
In fact, he's a
he
bit
was
player.
Okay, yeah,
a
right,
role
right.
player.
He's a bit role
and I
player.
would be surprised if he's not shocked, if he's not walking around saying, "Wow, what happened?"
You know, I just don't think so. I think he's happy just being in that slot. It's not hard to tell that he's already chosen his African American friend. It's Byron Donalds. He's chosen him. He runs with him.
Maybe
Tim
Tim
does
wasn't
not-
extreme enough.
Tim doesn't ride on the team bus anymore.
Right about that.
And a lot of people ask the question as it relates to Tim Scott, how did he jettison or abandon Nikki Haley? Because Nikki Haley, when she was governor of South Carolina, put him in the Senate.
That's right.
And when
then when
the
it was time to
came
be-
make a
to
decision,
endorse-
he made a decision to go with Donald Trump. And now, like Olivia, he's lost and turned out.
But I think you
I
only
would
do that
also
when you
ask
think
for
you're the
reference
person,
for
right?
that to the people at home.
Look it up.
Okay, so we
You don't want me to start singing, do you?
No, please no.
Okay,
No,
all
cut the mics. So and then we also want to get to the yesterday day one. So again, this was only day one, and we're just so excited to be here because this type of action doesn't normally happen on day one.
So what do we expect today?
Well, before that, I want to get to something that I didn't expect. I didn't expect to, have a break and go out and see my colleague here, Jonathan, having a great interview, which,
Oh, yeah.
again, we're going to roll with one of the most conservative Republicans, far right. How would you describe him, Mr. My Pillow guy?
Oh, the My Pillow guy. You know, he is a sort of happy warrior for election reform. I almost think that he's the only guy in the room that doesn't know he may be the butt of jokes. When
Nor does he care.
Nor does he care. I don't think that matters. And I think in many respects this is the last thing that he has that keeps him relevant, because
Right,
he's
but from a political standpoint, he's running with the big dogs here that are big fundraisers. He draws a lot when he comes out and he supports Donald Trump.
yeah.
Are
But
they,
how
are they letting him in the room though?
Yeah.
Well, you guys caught him on the streets.
Well,
so.
that's my point. He
Yeah,
was sweating on the corner.
and he wasn't at the podium. He wasn't at the podium. I
Right,
think,
but he's making the rounds. This is the Republican National Convention, right? This is what they do. They make their rounds. What was your discussion like with him? Not giving it all away because we will be running it, but what was that discussion, right, from a political standpoint?
I think from a political standpoint, Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, his job is to keep the base inspired and energized. I don't know that I do know he's not that influential in the party. He's not a decision maker. No one's saying, "Hey, wait, before we do this, let's go ahead and call Mike and see what he thinks about."
No,
that.
he's the base runner. He
not that
energizes
guy.
the base.
But every now and then, you need the towel boy in the dugout who's, hey, do you need some water? Do you need some Gatorade? He's that guy.
He's that guy.
He's the guy who keeps the folks refreshed. Well,
I'm confused.
Oh, yeah, I thought that was Tim Scott.
Yeah.
no, that's
his
not.
guy.
That's, yeah. But
Oh, he's the bat boy.
yeah.
Okay.
So
He's
what was his when you were speaking to him? What was the interview? What was his take around being
I
here
just-
or his outlook? Because from when I was there, I guess
Yeah.
he was giving you his outlook about the political parties.
Mike, interestingly, Mike has developed without knowing a sort of nuanced position that is neither Republican nor Democrat. It's rage.
It was rage.
It's literally rage against
Rage,
the machines.
that's it.
It's literally rage against the machines. That's his care right now. Is we shouldn't have electronic voting, and it's all suspect. And I don't know whether that really. I don't know if at this point, if you've noticed, we don't hear as much talk about the big lie
Well,
in the way that we once did.
And I was just going to say that's his job.
Right.
Because the party realizes
They can't
that
It's
they
not a
have
winner.
to
push that.
shift, particularly now, because we're moving into the general election, they've got to move more to the center. But they still need pit bulls out there on the
there on the
fringe
edge, yeah.
articulating their real fringe position.
Because their base is what's keeping them.
There you go.
Yeah,
paid.
and so to your point, just real quickly, is that in this party at this time, more than any other that I've observed in politics before, is when we say the word fringe, it used to mean folks who were at the edge. And in this party, in the MAGA Republican Party, the fringe is the center of the party. The fringe is what drives the party. The fringe is not that little O2 sensor in your car. The fringe is the transmission.
But you know what, too? And we're going to pause in a second. That's what's happened to our politics. We can say the same thing to a certain degree about the Democratic Party in that Bill Clinton, with the Democratic Legislative Council, moved the Democratic Party to the right. And so the whole dynamic has shifted right. And one of the large problems that if you're a Democrat, you're looking for is what happened to the left? Where's the progressive voice in the party? And can that ever be reclaimed?
Yesterday, to your point, last night when we were waiting on the former president to make his appearance on day one, at around 8:45, I looked at the time, and they kept saying he's coming, he might come 9:02. I looked at 8:45, you hear this voice, and it's like, what? It's like Donald Trump's voice. So you look, everyone's looking up, like, oh, we can hear his voice. And it's almost like at church, At least when I was growing up, you could hear that when they started to play, you're like, okay, he's coming out.
The deity has arrived.
Right. And I'm going to give them credit. This was brilliant how they set it up. Next thing you know, Donald Trump pops up on the Jumbotron in a pre-taped message to his base.
To his base, yeah.
And that message has not changed since 2016, 2020. You say you haven't heard that much about the big lie. That message that played for 3 minutes on the big screen
Was the big lie.
from 8:46, about 2 minutes, 8:46 to 8:48, was about, if you elect me, I'm going all paper ballots. I will protect your vote. We cannot trust the Dems, but what we can trust and know about them is that they will continue to be cheaters. All of that rhetoric. Now, this was pre-taped because he didn't have the little Band-Aid on his ear. But this was all about the Dems cannot be trusted. He said, we will win, and if we don't win, we will find out why. So it's the same wording discussion to set up the failure if he does lose. and all Democrats are cheating. We're the winners, and if you elect me, I'm getting rid of all of that. Absentee and all of that. It's going to be old school paper voting. So that same thing is still there. He's just using people like my pillow guy to push out the agenda.
The same thing is still there, and we are still here. Politics in Color, coming to you live from the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Don't move. We're going to be back.